afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm sure you've taken a bit of time out of your lunch break or your work day to join us, so it's great to have you here. My name's Roxy. I'm from Independent Vets of Australia, and it's great to be able to introduce you to Stuart Towers and John McNally if you haven't met them already. We're going to have a session today about your veterinary database. So it's a very appropriate topic to anyone because, you know, our databases are what we're using every day, and it's a real hub, a real asset for our practices. So John and Stuart are lucky. It's lucky we have them here today because they've got about 40 years experience in our industry here in Australia, working with veterinary practices, working with clients, and kind of bridging the communication between clinics and pet owners. So thank you, John, and thank you, Stuart, for being here today. Great to have you. So we'll be running for about 45 minutes today. Feel free to use the chat box down the bottom. If you have any questions, drop them in. And if we don't get to them through the session, we'll get onto them at the end. We'll have contact details at the end. So if you have questions or want to reach out straight away, you can. But Stuart, I'll hand over to you at this stage. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Roxy. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I know it can be very busy out there in clinic land just now. Probably a good thing. There's lots of clients, but that's obviously creating pressures, and so your time's valuable. I hope you don't mind my little attempt at humour on the slide first up, which we've used quite a few times at different meetings, and the fact that you are actually here at this event suggests you're not in the category of our friend with the sword in the picture. So introducing John and I, most of you probably know, we work with a couple, 3 or 4 different companies actually promoting various products in this area. iRecall, Vetstoria, and some others. However, I will stress this presentation here is applicable to everybody in the veterinary, presuming you've got a database that is handling your business. You certainly may well be using alternative approaches to what we promote, and that's obviously fine. But we think this presentation will have information that's useful to you in that regard. So your veterinary database, one of your most valuable assets. Most of you will know your veterinary database by one of these logos. You know, you use it for your appointment schedule, you use it for your clinic notes, all that kind of stuff. There's a few more that are missing on there, but don't worry if yours is not on there. You'll be very familiar with your individual product, I am sure. Let's just start a little bit about what is a database, and maybe John, can I bring you in here and talk about a little bit? John's very big on his water tank, so he'll talk to you about his where the database fits and what it's about.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. It was the best at the time, the best visual I could think of. But basically, it's a living asset. It's 7 days a week. It's working and behind the scenes in your vet clinic. And basically you can split the data into 3 categories. You've got your clients, their basic address, mobile, email, annual spend. You might have some sort of classification of your clients in there as to how valuable they are to you. Then your patients, species, breed, age, vaccination status, clinical history, and then the transactions. Just go to the next slide, Stuart.
Sorry, John, I will do when it'll let me. Yep.
Yeah. So we view it, you use it in 2 ways. You can use it passively, and our view of passive is that's your day-to-day. That's you registering your clinical notes, your appointments, etc. And then an active use is where you look at the data you're storing and try and use it to the advantage of everybody, really, the advantage of the pets, the advantage of the owners, and advantage to you in the clinic. To do that, it's all about communication. It's about targeted, timely, relevant, personalized communication.
We're gonna look in a minute at how you might build a communication plan, and when to use it and how best to use it. But first of all, I think it's organizing the data in there, and what I call mind the gap in your database where you can. The details you have that are a strategic advantage to you in your business are these client details that kind of almost come automatically to you in the vet business. When a person registers, they're expecting to give you their contact details, mobile numbers, home address, etc. These things do change over time. So this is where I'm advocating here that your database needs plenty of TLC. It will age over time. So getting new and checking existing details should be a regular business practice. And I mentioned the dentist down there. Every time I go to the dentist, I get a piece of paper and they want me to fill out, obviously, whether I'm on any medication or anything, but also my details and stuff on there. And I'm sure they are using that to keep their database updated. So the little form on the right is something we do at iRecall, but that's obviously you can set up your own form or you can do a format there. You don't have to push it down the throat of the clients, leaving it on the reception or leaving it on the little coffee table you've got in the rating area. Clients happily will pick it up. Some clients will and give you their latest details. And some might bring it to you and offer just to check that you've got the right details. But certainly make it part of your everyday work to give TLC to your database. The other element that we think is very important and we would encourage any clinic to do is put some measures around this. Can you track how many email addresses you've got? Can you track how many mobiles you've got? And it's not just the absolute number, because you'll have probably, if you've been in business, many years, you'll have a lot of people that are still on your database that are not really active clients. So before you do this, we would, get yourself to define what an active client is. In this case, I've said 18 months that they've actually visited the clinic and invoiced for something. Some other people advocate that they've got to have a consultation. Whatever you use, it's not that important. It just gives you be consistent. And then our recommendation is to measure the % of active clients that you've got email addresses for, the ones you've got mobile numbers for, and where you can, set some fun incentives for improving these metrics. John, you have a case where actually mandating this isn't always a very good idea, so maybe share that.
One of our bigger clients decided to set their RX work so that when you entered a new record or amended a record, you had to ask and enter a client email. Unfortunately, after 2 or 3 months, they discovered that a lot of Mickey Mouse, Donald Ducks, and any name they could think of was an email address being entered by the staff because they weren't getting the client email addresses. So mandating it, they couldn't save the record until they'd entered an email address, so they got very creative about email addresses.
So yeah, just be aware of that pitfall. That can happen, and I've seen that happen in other businesses as well, of course, where you're forced to put it in your database when you're entering an online form, but you don't really want to give somebody your email address. You just put in some rubbish. But here you can see, this is an active way. This is out of iRecall. You can see how many active clients within the range, and you're measuring it, and therefore you can say to the staff, if we can get this up to a certain number, there'll be some fun involved. And when you're using the bottom points there is when you're using electronic communications, you can always go back and look for how many of those email addresses worked and the bounce rates, how many of the SMSs worked, and monitor. Obviously, if you're sending letters, you still get returned to sender letters, of course. And I listened to a podcast last week from the guys at PetPack, and they made a very good comment here is that those kind of bounced emails and messages are a great excuse to contact a client, actually, if there is time, or if somebody is to say, look, we tried to send you something about your vaccine or a newsletter or whatever it was, and it doesn't work. Can we just check your details, please? And I think that is, if I was a client, that's a perfectly good reason for you to contact me and ask me those details. Okay, so give the collection of data lots of love, and the better you have that water tank organized and the less gaps you have, the more effective your communications will be. Okay, moving on a step, developing a client communication strategy. You're very lucky. You've got a good database. You've got a lot of good information in there. How often, when, what should I use it for? What kind of messages should I send out? I don't want to, I sense a lot of you in the veterinary industry get lots of emails. You probably get a few text messages as well. And you kind of think, oh, I don't want to be bothered by sending too much out. And so generally we err on the side of, in our opinion, under communicating with our clients. And I kind of use this visual, which is, it's clearly most clinics I go to are very good at handling what happens when the client walks in the door. They're very good at, how the consultation works, how the communication works, how we triage a patient or when they come into the waiting room. And that's clearly important, no doubt about that. However, as you can see from my little chart there, they visit you 3 times a year. That's a very small percentage of their daily life that is at the vet clinic. So build a communication strategy that can keep you in touch and in the minds of your clients throughout the year. Don't just rely on the visits, is our message. Whether it be electronic, whether you're using social media, whether you're using advertising, newsletters, websites, they're all forms, of course, of staying in touch with your clients, and they're all relevant, and you've got to work out a way. But don't think that your clients don't want to hear from you. They do. You are their vet. John, I'll pass over to you.
This is your client base. And I reference an American I heard speaking this subject many, many years ago, and he used the smiley faces to describe your client base. And your pet parents, your fur babies sit at the top end of it, down to your Mrs. Grumpy's at the end. And 95% of your aggravation comes from the lower end of the scale. His suggestion was you refer these people on to your competitors, because you'll never please them. But anyway, the key message in this one is don't base your communications strategy based on how you think Mrs. Grumpy is going to react to it. So we're working on the...
Yeah, and Mrs. Grumpy is often a bit louder than the other ones, is what happens. So the 2 or 3 complaints we've had sometimes override the silent majority. And one of the ways I advocate to clinics to look at this is on your unsubscribe percentage, because people can unsubscribe to your emails or your messages or your SMS or your newsletter, of course. And sometimes when we get 10 or 12 people that have unsubscribed, we get a little bit concerned that that's a lot of people or we're over communicating. If you turn that 10 or 12 into a percentage of the 1,000 or 1,500 messages or whatever it was that you sent out, it actually is a very low number. And therefore, you've got 99.5% of your people essentially saying they still want to get those messages and 0.05 saying they don't. Base it on the majority. Think of it that way. When and how should you communicate? I kind of like to put this in a kind of a push-pull appraisal, really. A bit like a notice board. the pull where the clients need to be active, they need to be active. If you put a message up on your notice board, your clients or whoever you're aiming at has to walk past that notice board or go there to get that information. So they might have to read the newspaper, they might have to be on Facebook or on Instagram, or they might have to visit your website to get that kind of information. And that's okay. Obviously, to get it out to a wider audience, there's only a certain amount of people that will go to your website or do those sort of things. The push communication is using your database, really. So this is where I might have Roxy as a client. I've got a direct communication to her using her address, maybe a physical address or email or SMS. I can make that much more personalized, of course, in this case. I can be very targeted. I might know that Roxy has a dog that's over 8 years old, so I send her the stuff about seniors, or that she had a dental a little while ago. I know which parasite product that she bought from us, so I might send her some reminders about that. Much more personal. I also might push a newsletter towards them, although obviously it's easy to segment a lot of information. So think about the direct push things, getting it to using your database. Probably balance that against what you're doing in the pull side of things. Measurement of communications is pretty important. You know, we often, and I've been guilty of this in my marketing past, of course, do a campaign. So how well did it work and what were the metrics? And unless you think about that upfront, it's quite difficult to go afterwards and say, this is what happened. But when you're doing a communication, you'll have heard the term call to action, of course. Online booking is good for that, you know. So if you're asking them to make an appointment, how many have clicked on the online booking? Call the clinic. You know, maybe some people like to put a message on, you know, bring this message to the clinic and we'll give Fido some treats or whatever. That kind of thing is always a call to action from what you've done. We also encourage clients, if they're doing a specific dental or seniors promotion or whatever, you can set a specific code up for those promotional deals so you can measure it afterwards. That's a great thing. So then you can see how much you've spent and how much, you know, what your return on investment is. You'll have heard about open rates and click-through rates before. That's also important. You know, if you keep tracking those, you can see on the picture there how we track them within our recall. So how many messages you've sent out, how many were opened, how many people actually clicked through. And also, as I'll repeat again, these are unsubscribes that you can measure as a percentage rather than an absolute number.
Stuart, I've just got a question here, which I think is relevant to what you were just saying. So I'll just read it out. So given the rate at which some people change their mobile phone numbers or preferred email addresses, are there any avenues for bulk marketing using Facebook Messenger? And what are the recent trends for people engaging with email newsletters? Also, SMS bounce rates were mentioned previously. How is this measured? So there's a few questions in there.
Yeah. The thing about Facebook Messenger and also WhatsApp, I think there will be changes and use in that area going forward. These things have been essentially at this stage not very attractive for commercial use, but I think it will evolve over a little more period of time. What was the next one, Roxy?
So what are the recent trends with people engaging in email newsletters?
Yeah, email newsletters is interesting. I think where we see the trends going is if in a newsletter, you'd often try and cover lots of different topics. So you might cover your senior program, you might cover something on dental, you might have something for the rabbits, and you might have something for the cat issue. So therefore, if I get that newsletter, I might, you know, 10% or 15% might be relevant for me. A more specific trend that you guys have got available to you is, you know, who's got the cats, who's got the rabbits, who's got the senior pets. from your database. So if you send information that is tailored in that way, it's probably going to be more better accepted, and you can communicate more on that specific issue by using your individual information. So the newsletter, you've got to be careful, isn't too generic. I don't say there isn't a place for the newsletter, because there's stuff that is relevant, might be staff profiles or whatever for everybody. But people can often, you know, unless the newsletter is very high caliber, can sort of say, oh, delete, 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 if I've seen it all before. It's not specific for me. Did I cover it all?
I guess that comes down to how good your database is, so that you can send rabbit information to your rabbit clients and puppy information to your puppy clients. So then SMS bounce rates. So I guess one of our IVM members did ask about why SMS open rates are so much better, but Peter's question was also relating to how you even measure bounce rates from SMS.
We are commenting that when we do it through iRecall, I believe it's the carrier we use gives us a report back straight away as to whether the SMS has been delivered or whether it's bounced. Sometimes if the phone's switched off or the account's out of credit or whatever, then it goes into a holding pattern for a little while. So that's how we measure it in particular. I'm not absolutely certain how you would do that in practice if you were sending out, say, RX works to measure which ones have been delivered, which haven't. But
we've had some challenges, or I think that veterinary clinics have had some challenges also with certain settings in certain CRMs as well as certain practice management systems. You know, allow direct marketing is the classic one in RX works, which often needs to be ticked to get an SMS to the client. And sometimes, depending if it's been set up by somebody at reception, it might not be ticked or it might not be mandated. So there's bits and pieces like that we've helped clinics with. I think that also you made a point there, Roxy, about why SMS is so why it's so high for open rates in SMS. It is obviously very direct. It's very much on the mobile phone, but so is email. My example, or is the reason for that is that people have to pay for SMSs. Okay, so marketing companies generally feel like they're sending emails for nothing. So I can send out 20,000 emails and it doesn't, apart from a bit of bandwidth, it doesn't really cost me anything. Whereas if I send an SMS, it costs me 10 or 15 cents to send that SMS. Therefore, by nature, you're being selective, and much less SMS traffic is available. Therefore, your message is going to get read and much more cut through. If you had to pay 10 or 15 cents for every email you received, my guess would be you'd get a lot less email. But that's just the nature of the beast.
It probably goes back to, as well, you said before that pet owners select their vet. So if I had an SMS from my doctor, I would pay attention to it. And I guess it's the same for vets. If your vet messages you would respond more highly to it.
No, for sure. Just a point here on using data, whether it's mobile, email, or whatever, and where you choose to send something, wherever you can, use live data. Your database, as I said, you're lucky it's been updated constantly. But when you download it and send it to somewhere to maybe send out the latest newsletter or do something every day that's not in your hands, it's aging immediately. And that can lead to problems, of course, notwithstanding the worst problem of all is where you've got a euthanized pet that has been euthanized in your clinic, and then you've sent a message not being understanding that, of course, or whatever, and that's the worst situation. But not just that, we work on clinics a lot to try and get lapsed vaccine people back into the clinic. And if you send a lapsed vaccine message to somebody who was vaccinated in the last 2 weeks, that's pretty embarrassing too, because you did it at your clinic. But using live data, you will avoid those sort of pitfalls. So one of the key areas in that I think pretty much all do is reminders, of course. You know, you've got, and this is based on the records in your practice management system. You've got timely prompts for your clients to book, to apply or purchase treatments or services, vaccines. You can go a lot wider, of course, arthritis injections, dental, and compliance. And we'll talk a little bit about reminders and some of the data that we see from our point of view as well as to what kind of return rates you can expect. Timing is important, and this is often a big discussion. When should I send a reminder? There's no absolute answer. Our recommended rate and what we've seen work is to send the first one 30 days before it's due. We would recommend sending another one, and if possible, not if they've already booked, but if they haven't booked, send one 7 days before it's due. And then we would send ones 15 days overdue, 45 days overdue, and 75 days overdue as the final one. And whatever numbers you use, a recommendation from us is don't make those numbers multiples of 7. So if your reminder's going out on a Monday each time, you probably want to vary the day it gets there to try and get the response from the client.
I think another comment, Stuart, on that as well, as we see occasionally people try and make these intervals too short, and it almost, to me, almost verges on harassment.
Yeah.
So I think.
Stuart, one question that I had on email was, what about the role of phone reminders, like for vaccinations specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question, Roxy. Thanks for sharing. I think there certainly can be a role for phone reminders. There's two things to be aware of, I think. One is whoever's calling the clients about reminding them of vaccines needs to be good at it and needs to want to do it. Often I've seen it not work very well when they are reluctant to do it and don't like doing it, and they often don't do a very good job. So pick your staff members who are capable and good at it to do phone reminders. The other thing to be aware of also, and I think this is increasing over time, and depending on the demographic, somebody will pick up the phone and say, "Why are you calling me about that? Why don't you just send me a message?" Why, you know, I'm not used to picking up the phone and talking to somebody, which is probably the demographic a bit younger than me, but they'll think, you know, just send me a message, will you? So again, there is a role. I think SMS and email are probably where you should prioritize your efforts. But I certainly know that quite a few clinics, particularly when it comes to that final reminder, will go to telephone to try and chase those up.
Thanks.
Now we've got about 200. We work with over 90 clinics, something like that, currently. And generally we see a very consistent return rate for people coming on time. Okay, so if you send your reminder 30 days before, on average, we see about 42%, and it doesn't vary that much, I don't think, John, does it, the bandwidth?
I would say over COVID, it used to be around 48%, but in the last 18 months, it's dropped back to about 42%.
Yeah. And that's for and even if whether you're using our recall or not, of course, or any system, I think that would be fairly consistent what you get. It's the amount of people that will come based on that first reminder. The real key to successful high return rates is how effective you can follow up the overdue people. And that's where we see most improvements in clinics that we work with. And of course, I'm saying measure it if you can. That's just to highlight the return rates for the first return, i.e. so people coming in on time, you know, before they get their first overdue, essentially, is what we're saying there. After they've sent two overdues, the 15 days and the 45 days, that goes up to, on average, 68% of people coming down. Now, this will vary depending on your demographics, of course, a little bit. Some get obviously much higher than that. But if you think and this is just to stress how important that these overdues are. If you've got 2,000 active clients, the difference between the 42 and the 68% is 520 clients. Okay, so that's 520 people walking into the door to have their vaccine or SR12, plus whatever else, whatever other business they will do with you while they're at the clinic. Okay, so that's why we would say that these overdue remind, whatever you do for your first and second reminder is kind of, you'll get 42% probably, but you've got to be consistent and clever about following up your overdue reminders to get the real difference made. Quick one here on appointment reminders. I'm just looking at the time. We're all right now, Roxy? Yeah. Yep. Appointment reminders, these are and I'm sure you guys all see this in your own personal lives as well. If the mechanic can do it, if the hairdresser is doing it, if the lady who does your nails is doing it, then the vet clinic should be sending me a reminder for my appointment. The only thing I would say on that is once you start, you've got to keep going. And I say that to my dentist. I like his appointment reminder, but if he doesn't send it to me next time, I may well not show up because you become, but still appointment reminders. And I put this in again, looking at the demographics as it's changing in our client base. They're expecting this. They're also expecting to do online booking as an example. I think it's more and more becoming a significant sort of differentiator when they choose a vet clinic, that they are getting these sort of things and being able to book online. So quickly moving on, we finished with reminders, of course. Moving on from that is then, okay, not just reminding people that you've got in your database that need to come back for a vaccine. What about promotion of other services? Senior pet promotions, dental promotions. Clearly, whatever you send out should be consistent with your clinic recommendations, and it's veterinary recommendations that you're giving in these kind of promotions. And there's a couple of different sort of ways we go about this. You can do ongoing campaigns, okay, automatically send birthdays or welcome packs or people that haven't shown up for a while. That can be very effective. Or you might be sending a batch send of message, to people on, for Christmas messages for dentals or ticks. And if I was, in this area where I live in Sydney, if my vet didn't send me something about the tick season and something coming up about ticks, I'd be thinking that's a bit strange. Obviously, it's a big issue and a very important issue, as is heartworm in other parts of the country, and dental care, of course. Moving on, unsubscribes. This is part of database marketing that's important and is probably going to grow in importance as legal changes happen. When I unsubscribe from a website these days, usually it's a two-way. There's two options, not two options, or two ways it's done. I either click on an unsubscribe and it then opens up an email and sends an email to that business and says, I don't want to receive any communications anymore. The second way you can get it is where I click on the unsubscribe and it will take me to maybe a little visual like you can see there from the vet clinic, where you can say a bit more specifically, I can manage my preferences. So I've heard this a lot in vet clinics. I get unsubscribed from Roxy and the vet clinic gets, what does that mean? Am I allowed to send her a vaccination reminder then? Or an appointment reminder? Or is that just that she didn't want the dental thing that it was that I'd sent her? So this is where managing the client preferences is becoming more important, and that's the way the direction is going. And I personally believe that's the way legally it will go in time, as it has gone in Europe already, that we will have to let clients manage their own preferences going forward. So that's a bit of marketing automation things for you about the right message, right client, right time. And finally, just something that I think is particularly relevant now. I talk to a lot of vet clinics, and I talked to Roxy about this as well. In the world of veterinary clinics now, people are so busy. You know, COVID has given you a lot of extra things to think about, challenges in terms of how you can bring animals into the clinic, etc. And a lot of people are not enough vets, and staff are under pressure to quite a lot. You can use your database to help this, in our view, and I've heard this from a few clinics as well. So this is client feedback, however you get it. You know, you might get it through Google, you might get it through Facebook. Feed all those comments back to your staff on a regular basis. What we would also look at is how you can automate that process and ask your clients how they're feeling and how their visit was. And these are very common. These are just some actual examples we've taken out of the iRecall review platform, where clients have given, obviously, some very positive feedback to the staff and the team. So at the start of any day, or nearly 2 or 3 times a week, you know, sitting down to the staff and saying, well done, read these messages, take it on board. These, you know, these are actual feedback. We know everybody's under a bit of pressure, but give them a hug. It's a great way of doing it. So how you can achieve that through a message is again, using the database. The client's been in the business yesterday or an hour ago is what we would say. Send the message out within an hour. Obviously, give somebody the role of checking the feedback and distributing it. Don't be afraid to celebrate. You know, these are gives us a lot of pleasure to know that these people are very happy. This also gives you an opportunity. We call it the hot alert, where if somebody's not happy, you get a message quite soon that you can actually rectify that. But as John and I can testify from the work we do in this area, 99% of the comments that we get through from veterinary clinics are very positive. So make sure your staff know that. So my summary slide here, your database can be a significant asset. Give it lots of TLC, please, if you can. Your communication to your clients when they're not in the clinic is very important. You know, we clearly spend time on communication when they are in the clinic, but upgrade your skills where you think you should for when they're not in the clinic. John's point was a very good one earlier about don't build your communication strategy with Mrs. Grumpy in your mind. They do exist, but there's, you know, far outweighed by your positive clients who are expecting good information. The reminders, effective, particularly vaccine SR12 reminders, the real difference is made with effective follow-up of overdues. And that's vital for, you know, I'm probably in that camp. I don't pay my gas bill until I get the red lettered gas bill. A lot of people will only respond when the first overdue one comes. And finally, everybody loves a hug. Motivate and celebrate with your team. Find a way that you can talk to your clients and get that feedback. Obviously, some of it's already coming through Google reviews where you can encourage that more. Do it. We'd be happy to help as well, of course. Thank you, Roxy, for helping us and sharing the questions. I don't know whether there's any more in the chat box.
Yeah,
now, or John, you've got some more questions.
Yeah, there is one, Stuart, from, and it's around the complexities of using your database where you've got multiple family members and partner donors. Legal consent issues. Some pets may even have a couple of different names or multiple email addresses and phone numbers for multiple family members, etc. And the comment is that you need a fairly powerful database to handle all of that. And then you have the training issues over and above, and that's before spelling and deduplication, etc. And these are all very valid points. And I think it goes, to some extent, goes back to communication strategy. If you try and take all of this into account, I don't think you would do anything. And we know, I think to put some context in this, we send close to 300,000 messages a month at the moment. The unsubscribe rate from them is absolute peanuts. So the messages are timely. And I think what happens in a lot of clinics is that if you do make a mistake, and everybody makes mistakes, and there's no software system that's not going to make a mistake. It's the old, if the content isn't accurate when it goes in, then it's not going to be accurate when it comes out. So, but you just have to be geared up to handle the odd client that says, by the way, this is not the number to use. And we find that a lot of database systems have got a preferred number. Certainly our software is also very good at cleaning data, so it can clean aberrant characters from phone numbers. So if it's got home or work or Mr. or Mrs. We're very good at finding, even within multiple fields, we can find a valid mobile number. And generally clients, if it's not right, they'll tell you, So my main comment in this would be, you can take all this into account and then it goes into the too hard basket and you end up doing nothing. I think it's better to do something and accept that you may have to, that you may make the odd mistake.
I think going back to this, certainly, and this is applicable to other systems, you see on the right-hand side the contact preferences there. It's very easy for, certainly I recall people anyway, in there to block communications to anybody. So, if you've got certain people or certain addresses that don't want particular communications, that can be done. Yeah, I think John's right too. You've got to think of all the vast majority of people who are looking for effective communications, and then handle the few that you need to be specific with in a individual cases.
I think the two things that really stood out to me was you were talking about your unsubscribe rates, and I think actions speak louder than words in that situation. If you are sending out messages to your whole database and you get 2 or 3 unsubscribes, well, the majority have enjoyed it or not minded that SMS. But the other thing that I thought about quite a lot too was your pie chart, Stuart. So there's a lot of time that they're not in our clinics. So how can we make the most of that time? And I think that comes back to your whole topic, which is your database.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, Roxy. And even when they're in the clinic, how much have they retained when they've driven out of the car park? So going back to them and sending them messages and saying, you bought a new food and this is why you bought it, and whatever, maybe a follow-up message, or where you can, because most people have got very busy lives, and okay, you've got some super people that'll remember every last word that you recommended, but you've also got people that are in the clinic, they'll do that, basically look after their animal, and then they're moving on with their life as soon as they left the clinic.
Yeah. I've got 2 kids, and so I'm walking out thinking about what to do with dinner and how to sort out the kids.
and then you've got somebody at home when you've arrived back with the medication. You say, "What was this for?" And not quite. Yeah, anyway. You're right. It's busy lives, and I don't think they mind getting. I think they're expecting messages from their veterinary professional.
Me too. Yeah. Because I would expect it from my doctor or my dentist, like you said. So what about, I was talking with a member prior to this session, what if you want to get started, but you've got, phone numbers in lots of different fields in your database, and you just don't quite know where to start?
There isn't a perfect database out there. I said give it some TLC. It always needs consistent care. but there's always going to be some gaps. There's always, so you kind of, the way to keep get a database in good shape is to use it. Okay, so you use it and then you're monitoring the ones that have bounced back or whatever. Then you can do something about them if you like. If you don't ever send a message to that using that mobile number or that email address, you don't know whether it's good, bad, or ugly, if you like. The other thing I will point out also, which I don't think came out during the presentation, is always put a top limit on whether when you're sending a communication, i.e. that client must have been in the clinic in the last 2.5 or 3 years. Okay, so don't leave it open-ended to send out something on, say, dental, and suddenly people you haven't seen for 5, 6, 7 years are getting a message from you. That's not appropriate. Okay, because obviously the dog might. So you've got to send it to either current clients or somebody who's recently, whatever you define as recent enough, and put that as a top filter on your data when sending out messages of this kind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And another point that another guy made to me this morning is we spend a lot of time focusing on the people that were vaccinated last year, and we're good at sending reminders, but we're not very good at sending a message to the people who weren't vaccinated last year. So what are we doing about them? They're the guys that have, if you almost slipped off the treadmill a little bit, they're not going to get a vaccine reminder the year after because they didn't get a vaccine last year. So again, there's, if you were sending that kind of message, you know who was vaccinated last year and you know who wasn't, and you can tailor those messages.
Yeah, and that's probably where a phone call comes in handy too. Yeah.
Phone call can be good.
So we've had a question come in. Do veterinary clinics need to catch up with other businesses who value this department enough to have dedicated employees to handle it, or is it still considered unnecessary or not economically viable?
My answer to that is clearly it depends on the size of your current business, the scale. I have people, we work with businesses who have essentially a dedicated marketing manager working with this stuff consistently. And, our experience is the more communications they do, the more their business grows. The more they're in touch. They've got to be professional. You're not sending rubbish out, you're sending professional communications out. The better their business is. But clearly that, depends on the size of your business. But mostly, I would say upscaling in this area is a good idea.
And I imagine it's about making it into steps as well. You can't do everything straight away. So making a bit of a plan and stepping through it slowly. Yeah. Great. Well, there's no other questions at this stage, so we can wrap up there. Thank you so much for your time, John and Stuart. I think it's very relevant information. Our databases are full of clients that think of us as their vet, and we need to be there for them and try and fill in that red section of the pie chart, so that they're coming to us for information rather than perhaps Dr. Google. So what we'll do from here is we will send out a copy of the recording to everyone that's registered. I'll include in that email for you all Stuart and John's contact details. There'll be some information in there about iRecall as well, but please reach out in the meantime if you have any questions or you want some more information. So thank you, John. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Roxy. Great organisation. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.